You're now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show. I love that I've got you on the show because you're the very first female property investor we've had on the show.
Amazing.
And I'm sure you'll relate with this, but a lot of property experts, investors, developers, it's a very male-dominated industry. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but let's start with you and why property?
Yeah, why property? It started sort of 12 years ago now, maybe a little bit before, but it took time to get the first one. We were about to have our second child. We've got 2 children, Luke and Georgia, and Craig and I both had okay jobs. We were never going to set the world on fire, and we were just having those, looking forward conversations. And it came up one day, how would we ever retire? How will we ever pay the bills when we do want to retire? We loved all the property programs. We used to watch them all the time. And a chance chat with my mum where I said, we'd love to do, a development one day or buy something and do it up. She's like, your dad's always wanted to do that. And it sort of went from there, and we pooled resources, and I was looking around all the properties and was self-taught to go and look at the auctions. I'm a contract manager by trade. I was at Accenture for the last 12 years of my corporate career, and it just fits really nicely. The transferable skills from being a contract manager into looking at property and due diligence and risk was quite felt a very natural and easy step to do.
I love that though, because it's very, like you say, it's transferable, but there was still parts of you that was still in that role, probably thinking, I'm happy there, don't really need anything else. What actually pushed you to then take the leap? Because I often find a lot of people are like, I'd love to get into property one day. I'd love to do that business one day. What was it that actually forced you to take the leap and go, I'm going to do this?
I think probably having our second child and thinking we need to do something to start building a pension pot. We didn't have significant pensions. Craig had a very small one. I'd not started mine with Accenture yet at that time. And then once Dad was on board as well, it gave me a target and something to be. It's that accountability, isn't it? It wasn't a one day for us. It now becomes an accountability to say to Dad, this is what I'm looking at. This is where we're at. And once I started looking at the auctions, I was hooked. And so I probably have a file of, 10 or 20 auction properties before we actually got the first one.
Wow.
Because you can be at an auction and you can have done all the due diligence and work in the world, and on the second bid it might have gone 50 grand over what your top bid is, and you're finished and you have no idea of that before you get in the room.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people watch these sort of Homes Under the Hammer and all these TV programs. I'm one of those people that quite likes to binge watch those, and it sounds by your nodding you definitely had a few of those. But I think that people feel like it is this sort of dream world of, I'm going to put money on an auction and I'm going to buy a property and I'm going to do it up and I'm going to make millions. What were you expecting to have when you got into the property world?
Yeah, I was expecting to take it slower, take it smaller. And it's the risk assessment side for me always is the right, where do you think this is going? Why is the property at auction? What are the issues with it? Can they be overcome? And if they can't, what's your worst case scenario? And if you can work down your absolute worst case scenario, and will that destroy you or will you be okay? Nobody wants to go to worst case scenario. Nobody wants to lose money, but will you be okay? And what I found in property is that the answer is generally yes to that. If you have your eyes open, you understand your due diligence, it's actually quite difficult to lose everything in property. The property is always going to be worth something, even if you do make a loss. So then you can understand, right, how do we move that forward so we don't get into that position?
Such an interesting way of looking at it, because a lot of people are scared of getting into property because they feel like they're going to lose it all.
Because that's what you see in the press, right? If they're going to put a story in the press, it's going to be about losing everything. Generally, if you lose everything, it's either because you've been ripped off, there's been a criminal element in there, which you can't, we can all be subject to a crime. There's not a lot you can do on that side. Or because you've stuck your head in the sand because you don't want to admit that it's gone wrong and you leave it too long and something gets repossessed. That's probably the only way where you're going to end up losing. And even if something's repossessed, there'll be money sold and something will be cleared in your debt.
So you wanted to start slow and steady. Did you start slow and steady?
No, timing's everything, isn't it? We, as I say, because of the way that the auctions went, the first one that we were successful on, we actually completed on as I was having Georgia. I was taken into hospital earlier than expected. So my husband had to deal with getting the place renovated and let out to tenants whilst I was in the hospital. And then 6 weeks later, our world imploded. My brother very sadly lost his wife. She was hit by a car just before Christmas. They had a 2-year-old son, as did we. He's only 2 years older than me, so he was 34 at the time. It was a heartbreaking, really, really difficult time. And within a week or so of that, I'd been diagnosed with postnatal depression. And everything just always seems to snowball at once, doesn't it? But long story short, they needed, in my eyes, they needed that same financial long-term protection, Daniel and Jamie, that we were putting together for ourselves. And so I took Daniel to look at some auction properties we were looking at. And I asked him if he wanted to be involved, and that, again, we were doing it as a pension pot. We weren't doing it to flip them and make money and move on. We were doing something for the future, and it would be the future for our children as well. And he said yes, and without knowing anything about it at the time, that was probably the start of setting up a investor-developer relationship. And I guess looking back, it's classic avoidance. But over that 12 months of mat leave, I bought 9 properties altogether. So 8 of them tenanted. So we had a full portfolio of tenanted properties, and 1 that we bought for ourselves, and we moved house. We moved house twice because I accidentally made us homeless. But yeah.
Wow, as you do.
Yeah,
what happened there?
We found a property we wanted to move to. And so I put the equity in our current property. I kept the property that we were living in and put that equity into the portfolio pot. So actually we went up to 9 rented properties plus our properties. That was the 10. And my biggest fear there was having 2 mortgages. Because the flats and the little house that we bought first, they were all tenanted and they were great. But we'd be moving out of our 4-bedroom house into a new, bigger house, and that needed to be let. And the thought of having those 2 mortgages was really scary. And a friend who was helping me, who was in property, had said, you'll be fine. You'll always get a sort of 4 to 6 weeks, because nobody's going to rent a property 4-bed on from nothing. They will be in a property that they need to give notice on. They'll already be renting. And a family came to see it, and they had family who were living abroad who were coming back, and they said, we want it, but we want it in 2 weeks. And I just said yes, and then worry about it afterwards.
Wow.
Tell Craig afterwards.
I
We've
love
got to be out in 2 weeks, but we won't have any financial worries.
I love that, Colette, you started this by saying you're quite risk averse.
I didn't say I was risk averse. I'm very good at risk assessment.
That was it, sorry. Very good at risk assessment. And then it's like, P.S. we're moving out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
Oh, and
I went and bought a car at auction as well, because I had a little Mercedes that didn't fit very much in, so I went and bought a RAV4 that I still got, that everybody now hates because I've had it for so long. But it's my trusty steed, and I pretty much moved us from our house into this little house. I just get filling the car up and the baby, and drive to the house, and then take everything out, and then sit down and have a cry, and then drive back and start all over again. And go, right, just keep going, we'll get there.
So all of this was going on. All of this was going on when you were on maternity.
Yeah.
And with the postnatal depression.
Yeah. And with a 3-year-old and Georgia. By the time we moved house, Georgia was 10, 11 months old. And we'd just moved into this little it was my friend's 2-bed. And I went to see her and I said, we are going to need it, and we're going to need it in 2 weeks. She was the same lady who'd said to me, you'll have at least 4 weeks. And I've ripped the bathroom and the kitchen out, because that never happens, Colette. I said, it's fine, we'll take it anyway. So Craig put the bathroom in, so we had a bath and a toilet and a sink, but the walls were bare plaster, and the kitchen had been taken out but put in the garden because there wasn't a driveway access, and they were going to get a skip delivered and take it all out, and we just brought it back in.
Oh my gosh. So it's like all at once.
All at once.
Yeah, why
do
not?
Everything all at once. Yeah.